Hey, Yuri Elkaim here, CEO and founder of Healthpreneur. We help health professionals get clients and scale their businesses online. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about the delegator's dilemma. Specifically, we're going to cover a couple things, including why you must be good at the very thing you want to delegate, but also why just because you're good at it doesn't mean you should also be doing it for any length of time. And I'm also going to talk about why being a former professional soccer player and having been on Dr. Oz, a national TV show in the States, is not all it's cracked up to be. That and so much more. Stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives. You know, she leaned into me and she said, I am so burned out. And what's worse is having more people under me isn't making it easier. In fact, the more I delegate, the worse it seems to get. Part of Renee's challenge, part of what she was describing, is in fact the delegator's dilemma. Delegation is very important, and it can be the downfall of even the best of leaders. So how is it so important? We need it so badly, and yet it can be the downfall. Well, she and we have to confront this leader problem, which is called the delegator's dilemma. We're going to talk about that in the show, so stay tuned over the next 2 episodes. As always, we need your help in staying relevant, so please get yourself over to wherever it is you tune into the show, and do us a favor, please. Rate, review, and subscribe to the show. We really appreciate that. If you are a regular listener, a big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners, and we are honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. By the way, in case you are curious, and I know you are, I'm Dov Baron. I am your host, and I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything by transforming meaning into action. Curious to know more? Simply go to dovbaron.com. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. There comes a point in every leader's career, especially an entrepreneurial leader, where they realize that what they are doing is unsustainable. The value they are adding is minimized by having to do so much. The answer is, of course, that they need to trust someone enough to be able to delegate. As much as delegation may seem to be the perfect solution, it can be actually a disaster. And as a result, you can end up with what's known, as we talked about, the delegator's dilemma. So how do we navigate this delegator's dilemma to exactly where we're going in our business and in our future? Well, that's what we're going to uncover and discover over the next couple of episodes, so stay tuned. Our guest on the next 2 episodes is Yuri Elkaim. He is, at 17 years old, Yuri faced an autoimmune system that took him from being the usual hairy teenager to bald. He then became a pro athlete who, at 23 years old, reconsidered his life path as an athlete and returned from Europe to pursue his greater passion, health and nutrition. From there, he went on to build businesses that would assist over 500,000 people around the world. Yuri Elkaim has become the leading health expert. He is a New York Times bestselling author and the founder of Healthpreneur. Yuri is a proud Canadian contrarian thought leader who actually walks the talk by sharing lessons and insights from being a pro athlete to having 17 years as a leader in the entrepreneurial trenches. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and help me to welcome the Dr. Zhivago of entrepreneurial leadership, Mr. Yuri Elkaim.
Thank you very much for that intro. Very nice.
welcome, mate. Good to have you with us. Thank you for joining
thank you.
us. It's good to have a chat with a fellow Canadian.
Likewise.
Always a joy. Where we always like to start the show, Yuri, is, you know, you're brought in, I'm brought in, consultants are brought in to work with companies, to work with organizations, and often we're brought in to solve a problem that's actually not the problem. There's something going on underneath that. In the context of leadership development, what is from your point of view, what's the most frustrating thing that seems glaringly obvious to you, but is ignored or dismissed by others?
Well, I think there's two things. Number one is owners or business owners or entrepreneurs can't see their blind spots. So we can't see the blind spots in our own business, which is a problem, which is why we bring in coaches, consultants, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And then with that said, I think, part of the discussion today is that I find that we get to a point in our career, in our business, in our role where we get tired of doing certain things, or we feel that we can move on to other things. And the first thing we want to do is get them off our plate. Right. And it almost feels like just get it away from me. And I feel that's how a lot of people delegate or outsource. Mm-hmm. And I think it causes a lot of problems, as opposed to kind of like thinking about that differently. And, because again, delegation is very important, because otherwise all companies would have one person. But it's how do we do it properly? And how do we avoid some of the common pitfalls? And that's, what we're going to talk about today.
Sure. So let's talk about this from the place of situational leadership, because I know that you run a lot of your company on that. You run a lot of your leadership around that. So let's help people to understand what that actually means first, because I think it's very easy to jump to a conclusion and go, it means this, right? So from your perspective as a leader, as someone who runs an organization, what does situational leadership mean to you?
Yeah, and I don't even need to use the labels, but just from like a high level understanding,
sure,
it's about matching the development of an individual with your leadership style. So that means if someone's coming into a role, they can be junior, they can be senior, they can be relatively novice, they can be an expert. And based on where they are on that journey, how you lead them or manage them is going to be reflective. It should be reflective of that. The challenge, though, and again, like I wasn't born with this stuff, and nor am I the world's best leader. These are things I've had to learn because I've made mistakes. So I think the mistake that I used to make in the past was I thought everyone was the same, and I basically treated them the same in the sense of, okay, here's the stuff I want you to do it, and that's it. Like it was a handoff. And when I started to learn, that doesn't work with all the people all the time. And I started to dive into more of a, getting into understanding of situational leadership and the understanding that everyone is a little bit different in terms of their character traits, their personalities, where they are in their journey with respect to their role. I started to consider myself almost more as a coach as opposed to just their boss. And that started to change things a lot for me. So, and the other perspective around this too is that when someone comes into a role, they can, again, there's different levels. They can be, senior, junior, whatever. But I think the mistake that I made as I started to learn this was I assumed that people that were, let's say, a bit more experienced and senior in that specific area could just be left to their own devices.
Right.
And this cost me a lot of money in mistakes, because I just said, okay, you're good, you do your thing. Hit some KPIs, we're awesome. And I think that laissez-faire attitude, whether they're junior or senior, in our case, has over the years led to some issues that we fixed. But I see this also happen in other organizations or small businesses. So the key, the distinction with situational leadership, to my understanding and how we apply it, is really moving away from top down, like you do this, to how can I support you grow in this journey, to the point where someone is nurtured, cultivated, and over a journey, over a length of time, they get to a point where you feel 100% confident that they can now do the thing maybe better than you can, and you're just there to support them whenever they need your help. But where people end up in that journey is unfortunately how a lot of people start the delegation process. So instead of being like, all right, you're good now, I'm here to support you as needed, at the end of the journey, that's almost how delegation is starting for most people. It's like,
Right.
Cool, do this thing, I'm over here if you need me, as opposed to really coaching and guiding them through the process. So I think that's how I see and how I apply situational leadership.
So let's look at that for a minute, because I want to go to the pushback around that, which is, first of all, okay, so I'm now a babysitter. I don't have time for babysitting. I've got to babysit them all the way through this. Or when I do that, they feel like I'm micromanaging them. So, those are the two sides of that. And I'm putting this forward as a leader listening in going, yeah, I like the idea, mate, but, geez, I don't have time for all that. Because it might be interpreted as micromanaging, or, as I said, that I've got to babysit them all the way.
Yep, and it's a valid concern. And I used to feel the same way too. So what that held me back from was hiring people, because I'm like, I'll just do it myself. And then I realized, hold on, I only have 24 hours in a day and I can't do this forever. So it took me a little bit more time. So we run more of a coaching business for health professionals, and we coach them to build their businesses. And what I noticed in our journey is I started off as the main coach, the main guy that they came to. And then we build out our coaching team, and we have other coaches that support our clients. So we now have about 250 active clients. I spend 3 hours a week with them, as opposed to one-on-one with 250 people. What I spend most of my time, well, I shouldn't even say most of my time. What I spend more of my time doing now is actually moving away from coaching our clients to coaching our team.
Right.
So I spend 3 hours a week coaching our clients, and I love doing that. And then I spend between two different departments, 1 hour a day, coaching various aspects of those departments. And for me, the way I look at this is, excuse me, every minute of coaching, development, feedback, support I can provide someone who's looking to grow is going to buy me back 100 hours in return in the long run. So I'm willing to make that investment up front, assuming the person is a growth-oriented individual and they want to get better in their role, because I understand that if I put in a little bit of time up front, I can completely, maybe not completely, but 95% remove myself from that process over time. So, like with anything, you have to invest. Like if you want to make more money, you have to invest some money, right? If you want to make more time, you have to invest, ironically, your time to help others develop. So that's how I would kind of counter that. And I do think that remember, I think as a leader, our goal is to build other leaders. It's not to build followers. It's to build other leaders who can then drive the business. And that requires a bit of input from you up front. But from my perspective, I would rather put in 1 hour a day coaching many people to have more leverage than spending 10 hours a day doing all the stuff that they would be doing otherwise.
So talk to us about, from a personal point of view, how did you get to this? Because most of us, if we're really honest, we learn our lessons by falling on our head. We learn our lessons through the pain, and then go, geez, I got to stop doing this. This is terrible. And then we keep doing it for another 3 or 4 years. Sometimes we're quicker than that. Oftentimes we're much slower than that. What was it for you?
So I think there's two pieces to this for me. One is I really enjoy empowering people. And I really do believe that people can become more than who they are, not because I want them to, but because they want to. And I want to be able to facilitate that growth for them.
Right.
I've got 4 kids, and my wife and I do things a bit differently. So she does everything. I do nothing. What I mean by that is, if my kids,
she's delighted with that.
No. We talk about this openly, so I'm not, disclosing anything that she hasn't heard.
I'm just teasing.
But if we come back from a soccer game and my kid's having a tough time taking his shoes off, like I could take his shoe off, but I think there's a lot of benefit to the struggle, right? In quotes.
Yeah.
And so I want to empower my kids to learn how to tie their shoes, to learn how to make their bed, to learn how to make some of their own meals. Because if I don't give them those or help them build those skills, they won't be dependent, they'll be more dependent on me or my wife, and they won't be as self-sufficient as a human as they go through life. So I take those same principles, and honestly, that's just been a core belief I've had for as long as I can remember. I've always been one to teach people how to fish as opposed to giving them the fish. So that same principle with the kids is kind of how I take it into the world of business. I said, okay, so this person is here, they want to go here, I'm going to invest some time. Obviously, there's trainings, et cetera, that go with that. But
yeah, of course.
I don't mind investing my time to help someone, to coach them, to ask questions, to help them develop, because they'll become a better version of themselves. And I think ultimately people want to be in working environments where there's growth, where they feel like they're improving their capabilities. And for me, that's very meaningful. So that's the first piece. The second piece is my previous business was built under my name. So it was my name, it was a health and fitness business online. And two of the kids just walked in. So if there's some screaming, that's what's happening there. But I realized like that business became very, very complicated. And I realized part of it was that there was just too much stuff that I was doing, and there was not enough, structure with the team and the right people, et cetera. And I learned a lot of lessons in that business that I said, I'm never repeating that ever again. And one of those things was around how I look at my time, how I use my time to understand, all right, if I'm doing something once, is this my genius zone, or is this something that eventually someone else could do?
Right.
And if it's something that someone else could do, I need to take a step back and be like, cool, let me document this. Let me put this into some type of recorded video or SOP that at the very minimum, I can pull out of the archives at some point and give to someone else. Because for me, I have a fundamental issue with doing something once that disappears into the ethers. Right. So like this podcast, as an example, is being recorded, and tons of people will see this into the future.
Yes.
This I love doing. If I were to have a one-off conversation with someone about the same topic and it just evaporated into thin air, there's not as much joy for me around that, because I don't feel that the leverage has been there or the leverage has been created. So how I've approached a lot of, my creative work has been around, think once, create things that can impact people for as long as possible. And then how that applies to people is very similar as well. So I'm kind of like removing myself out of the process. I don't want to be the cog in the wheel, because I've seen what that's done to, if I hadn't lost my hair, it would have happened anyways. And I just don't want to be that person. So.
Right. So when you think about that, let's talk about the subject at hand, which is the delegator's dilemma. How do you work out how to delegate and who to delegate to? Because, of course, the first argument of every entrepreneur, I know it's me too, not so much now, but back in the day, was, oh, geez, it'll just take me longer to teach you, and I got to drag this shit out, and then I got to check your work, and then I got to go over it. It's just easier for me to do it. That's the argument of every entrepreneurial leader, and oftentimes for a very, very long time. And even if they find somebody to hand it off to, there's another thing they're doing that they're saying exactly the same thing on.
Yeah.
I don't have time for that. So talk to us about this dilemma.
First of all, as a leader, none of us should have more than 6 to 8 direct reports. So if you have like 20 people that you're trying to oversee, you can't do that. Right. So number one, just from a structural perspective, make sure you have a handful of people that, you're overseeing. Second thing is you have to identify so the way I look at this is there's 2 exercises I do. One is like a 4-box grid. So if we think of like a quadrant, the bottom 2 are things I really, really hate. And on the side of that is things I dislike. So the energetic charge there is a little bit different, but basically on the bottom half of that quadrant are basically things that you just drain your energy. They're not enjoyable. You don't like doing them. For me, it's like editing articles, stuff like that. On the top of the quadrant, we have, if you think of the top left, we'll call this the genius zone. The genius zone are the things that you are the best at doing, that come naturally to you, that are energizing, and that you could really do day in and day out. And they also provide the most value to your company. So for me, and for all of us, to be honest, like there's really only a few things. Like there shouldn't be a list of 10 things. For me, it's really just communication. So like stuff like this, I love doing, like I'm happy to do this all day long. But the box on the right, I call the danger zone. And the danger zone is the stuff that, and especially for entrepreneurs, the stuff that you have to get good at in the journey of building your business, but you get so good at them, yet they're not your genius zone, that if you don't get those off your plate, they will rob your soul. So as an example, when I was starting my business, I had no clue about marketing, copywriting, etc. I had to learn that stuff.
Yes.
And I became very, very good at it to the point where I had a very tough time letting it go. And that slowed down our business. So I started to have to recognize that the leader of the business or of the department, their strength is often the weakness of that business or the department. So if my strength is marketing and I can't let that go, that becomes the weakness or the weakest link in the chain. So that was the first thing where I was like, hold on, okay, I need to learn, number one, how to master this area so I can grow. But at some point, I need to be able to then coach, delegate, whatever, this in someone else. So part of that is accepting that you can't do everything and being okay giving up control. So if someone can come in and do something 80 to 90% as good as you, it's better than 100% of you and your time into perpetuity. So that's kind of how I kind of map out, if I'm looking at my activities or the things I'm doing, like what falls where, and then I can make better decisions based on that. But with that said, I think part of it is you have to identify, and every business and role is a little bit different, but you have to identify where you are in your journey as an individual or a business, and identify the skills or activities that are important that move the needle for you. So as an example, so we help health professionals get clients grow their businesses online. The two most important skills we believe they need to equip themselves with are copywriting and sales. Now you might say, okay, hold on, like I'm a chiropractor, why do I have to learn this stuff? And this is a philosophical belief that we have, is that if they do not learn those skills, they're always at the mercy of agencies and other gurus who don't do as good a job as they could if they learned them in the first place. Now, naturally, you're not going to do that stuff forever, but you have to be dangerous enough so that you understand. You can have a conversation, right? You can understand good work. You can identify bad work or good employees or bad employees or whatever. So I think in the big areas that move the needle for your business, like you have, like the leader, you're essentially, you have to be a generalist. Like as the CEO of your business, you have to know kind of everything. And depending on where you are in that journey, you might be spending more time on one thing than another. So initially it's going to be acquisition. It's going to be marketing and sales. And if you're constantly looking for someone else to do that, well, you haven't mastered it yourself. How are you going to be able to identify someone else who can do a good job? We actually had a conversation with someone yesterday who 5 years over the last 3.5 years, she's outsourced her marketing to 5 different agencies. And we're like, why are you speaking with us? Right. And the reality is that those agencies didn't solve her problem. And her problem is that the fact that she's not willing to take ownership of the fundamentals of her business, the messaging, et cetera, that no one else is going to know as well as she does. Now, does that mean that she has to do that stuff for the rest of her life? No, but there's a foundation that needs to be built, and then you can delegate. Because at that point, you can understand the nuances. At that point, you can understand how to coach and train people, even if they are a little more advanced, because you understand the nuances of your business, of your messaging more than someone else would. So those are kind of, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of how
I think that answers the question very well, because I think that you're absolutely right. As you said at the beginning of this episode, people want to delegate because they're like, oh, geez, I just got to get this off my plate, right? And I understand that. We've all been there. However, there's this other piece, and I think you laid it out beautifully, which is as much as you may not want to do this, you've got to get good enough at it to recognize when someone else is doing a crappy job, an average job, or a fantastic job. Mm-hmm. But the proviso there that you nailed, and it's something that I've talked about with leaders forever, is just because you're good at it doesn't mean you should do it. Mm-hmm. Right? When I was a kid, everybody, including me, and you have the same thing with playing footy, with playing soccer. Everybody thought I was going to be an artist. That's what everybody thought I was going to be. My art was in galleries by the time I was 10 or 11 years old. So everybody naturally thought I was going to be an artist. I thought I was going to be an artist. But that's not who I became. I am an artist, but not in that form anymore. It's changed forms. So what happens is we get good at something and we think, oh, this is my path. You know, I was in health and fitness, but I've become so good at copywriting that I'm now going to change my business and become a copywriter. Well, okay. I'm not saying that's a bad idea, but if you're in business in health and fitness, as you're talking about, and that's really what sets your heart and soul on fire. As you were saying, you've got to be good enough to recognize you're actually crap at this. Mm-hmm. Like I've hired copywriters in the past and fired them and thrown away their copy because I'm a better copywriter than them. Copywriting is not my thing. Yep. I don't claim it as my thing, but I spent enough time learning the discipline of what it means so that I can go, that's great copy, that's not great copy. And better still, when I have a copywriter, I work with them. I go, you do the copy, I'll come back, we'll flush it out together, and it will be awesome. And it is.
Exactly.
But I really love your point, get good enough, or points rather, they're stackable, which is get good enough to recognize the difference between the average, the crappy, and the fantastic. But just because you're good at it doesn't mean you should continue to do it. And that, I think, is the biggest hook. I'm good at it, so I should do this. And look, I could make an extra 10 grand doing that. Yeah, and now you're not available to your business. You're Charlie, you've got to get good enough for your business to go, oh, okay. So I love that. And I think that's a great place for us to finish part one of the show here is the delegator's dilemma is I'm exhausted, I'm tired, let's give it away, let's find somebody else to do it without me being good enough to understand whether they're doing it right. And without me getting hooked into being, that's my new job, is so powerful and so awakening for people. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. As we come to the end of this part of the show, part one of the show, this delicious conversation, and we go into part two of this delicious conversation, please, I'd like people to know where they can find out more about you, your organization, what it is you do, your books, etc.
Yeah,
Could you please share that with us?
So our main website is healthpreneurgroup.com. So that's, you can learn more about what we're doing in our company. If you want to hit me up on Instagram, that's probably where I'm most active on social. I'm at healthpreneur. And those are probably the two best places. Then I have a ton of videos on YouTube if you're interested in all this stuff. I talk about it freely and give away everything I know. So those are the best places.
Fabulous. And we'll make sure, of course, that those links are posted inside of the show notes. So you can just look through the show notes and find them. And, you know, hey, if you're finding this valuable, do yourself a favor. Let's be generous. Share the episode out with other people. I'm sure you, as a leader, know people who are struggling with this delegator's dilemma. And this is a great way for them to see what it really takes to make it work. So share out the show. Please, we'd love you to rate, review, and subscribe too. That is also very valuable. We're going to be back in one click with our guest, Yuri Elkaim. With Yuri Elkaim. We're going to be back in one click with that, and we'll see you on the other side. So stay curious, my friends. Stay curious.